much time off, I assume. But in any case, I wish you all the best. And allow me, please, to start this press conference by expressing my solidarity with Spain, my condolences to the families of the victims of the railway accident and to all the people affected. I would like to acknowledge the effort and work that is being done by the security forces and by all the workers, emergency workers, and to stand by the side of the families, the relatives, and the hope. Let's hope that we can try and manage this terrible tragedy, this disaster, in the best possible way. And secondly, I would also like to refer to the Portuguese elections. José Antonio Seguro, I'd like to congratulate him for his victory. Of course, now we will see a second round where the Portuguese need to vote between someone who represents democratic European values, values of freedom, and those who represent the opposite, the candidate of the extreme right. So I hope that all Democrats, European Democrats, and obviously all Portuguese Democrats are going to be supporting José Antonio Seguro. And this is what I said to the leader of the EPP and Renew, Valerie Heyer and Manfred Weber. I hope that the people in the political groups in Portugal will support the democratic candidate, the person who represents freedom in Portugal. And I hope that this is a clear message from that point of view. And then to start with the plenary session, I think that we should start by referring that today we've had a year of Trump in the American administration, and that, unfortunately, all the bad omens that we had on this administration have actually been met. And if you talk about the extreme right and Trump, we're living through times where multilateralism, national sovereignty are under threat. European sovereignty, the introduction of tariffs of 25% to European allies, really calls for a very firm and clear reaction, because Trump only understands the rule of the strongest. And I said this during the plenary in December. I said it very clearly. The climate of silence, the approach of silence is not working. And a month later, time has proven me right. This is a message that needs to reach the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, Mrs. Callas. Let us speak the same language, the language that Trump understands, the language of power, the power of Europe during all of the negotiations. And Europe has economic and trade power and therefore should use this power. We should suspend the negotiations on the trade negotiations with the United States. You know that there is a majority agreement here between the European between the groups. There's a majority to suspend this negotiations. Tomorrow we will have a meeting of INTA and we will decide that no votes will take place at the INTA committee next week. I'd also like to remind you that possibly some months ago, when this agreement was signed by Trump and Mrs. von der Leyen, the Socialists, the S&D group, already warned about the dangers of this plan, and time again has proven us right. So I welcome those groups, such as the EPP group. I know they were not in favor of stopping these negotiations, and today they have understood that we need to stop these negotiations. And I think this is a good thing. I'm very happy to see that we can agree, that we can get a clear pro-European majority defending our economic interests and our trade interests. But that is not all. We need to also use the ACI instrument. I already said this before, and I repeat this. We need to ask ourselves a clear question. Where are those who defend patriotism, that is, against Trump? Where does the sovereignty of European citizens go if we have a rule-based order based on international rules? Well, we need to put the cards on the table. The time has come. We need to say very clearly that either we contribute to Europe, strengthen its sovereignty, defending a European project. At this moment in time, Trump's aggression against Venezuela and his threat to use force against Cuba, Colombia, Mexico, Panama, Greenland, all that is illegal. It is clearly illegal. We need to say this out loud. This is unacceptable. And Europe cannot keep silent. Trump has made it clear that he's not interested in democracy in Venezuela. His only interest is oil. And in the case of Greenland, the same is true. To invade Greenland is attack against European soil, and that is why we need to ask the member states to strengthen their presence in Greenland and call upon Council and Commission to develop a plan to, if Denmark asks for this, that is to start working on Article 47.2, because Greenland is not just exclusively a NATO issue. It is also a direct responsibility of the European Union, and that is why we need to deal with this properly. In the case of Venezuela, Europe needs to be a mediator. That is why we need to open a channel of communication between the democratic opposition, represented by Edmundo González and Maria Corina, and also the government with Delcy Rodriguez. So where does the Union stand? We know what the Americans think, the United States. They're just managing barrels of oil. What about Europe? Europe needs to be looking at the transition and managing this transition to democracy in Venezuela. So we shouldn't just be sending messages of support to the opposition in Venezuela. So we need to start working on a plan in order to reach this transition, a real plan so that the people of Venezuela can decide upon their own future. So again, we need to be very clear on this. And allow me to conclude before starting with the round of questions on Mercosur. That's another important subject this week. Europe needs to be more autonomous, strategically autonomous, and we call for sovereignty of Europe, the European Union in the area of defense, trade, technology, and that is why we need to promote Mercosur. One of the strategic decisions is this agreement with Mercosur. Mercosur today is more important than ever. Mercosur needs to be the reply to Trump, to the Monroe Doctrine. We need to open new spaces of support, of cooperation, of understanding with other regions in the world so that you can understand democracy and multilateralism in exactly the same way as Europe understands it. And the Mercosur agreement, I insist, that is the best response to Trump, to the Monroe Doctrine in the United States. Europe needs to start political, economic, trade relations with other regions which can move in the same direction based on the same kind of model. So our objectives are clear. Every crisis gives us another opportunity to strengthen the European sovereignty. And by way of conclusion, allow me to give you some good news under these difficult times. 40 years, Spain and Portugal took an historic step. a step towards democracy, towards freedom and progress, and towards rights. Countries that came out of a dictatorship and decided to move towards Europe, working in favor of democracy, freedom, and hope, which Europe represented for so many Spanish and Portuguese citizens. And today, this is what the European Union needs to continue doing. Spain and Portugal cannot be understood without the European Union, without Europe. So let us make a clear positive acknowledgement of the history of the last 40 years for two countries such as Spain and Portugal, and of course also for a Europe that has looked southwards towards Latin America, trying to make progress in this direction. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Iratxe,
Sorry, I forgot. We've obviously been working since last week when we started our discussions on this response to Trump, strengthening sovereignty in Europe. We've been working on a statement, manifesto with 10 points. We're referring to all of these points that I've been mentioning. Defending democracy, defending sovereignty, investment, and also military defense, digital defense. So these are 10 points here that I think reflect what we think in our group, and that can be distributed now for you all. Thank you.
thank you. And of course, those watching us online, we will also publish the document on our website. Yes, we take the first question here.
Oui. En français.
In French, here we go. Thank you very much indeed. Since yesterday, we've seen the massacre of Kurdish people, and we've seen also Christians being killed there in Syria. So there have been attacks by jihadists, helped by Turkey, and they were seen as the ally of the anti-jihadist coalition. Jihadists have been released there that have been controlled by pro-Turk militias. But the EU, for the moment, is doing nothing. Your group, the European Parliament, are you intending on doing anything? At least just to get these people's voices heard, trying to provide some help for the Kurdish people in Rojava. Today, we'll have a meeting with external colleagues, and we'll talk about this, and we'll see how we can answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Buenos días, Elisa.
Good morning. I'm from Greece. You're not going to be voting the Parliament on the US deal. Will it be cancelled, maybe? Is that a possibility? For the moment, what I can say, as you know, there was an agreement, and therefore various measures were put forward, approval of 2 specific reports on tariffs, different products, and that was pending here in Parliament. And we've said we're not going to vote on that. That's not going to be processed. That's not going to happen. For the rest of the agreement, the political agreement, well, that hadn't been sent to Parliament, so there's no real management to do there. But I think it's very clear, it's obvious, in a trade war that Trump is saying he wants, well, he's talking about increasing tariffs, yesterday to 25%, today 200% on French wine. This trade war, it's just really impossible for Europe to adopt any sort of rules and regulations when it comes to 0% tariffs on North American products, American products. I think that's just logical to think that way. So what we can do in Parliament, what we do in our legislative work, everything's paralyzed.
Max, please keep your questions short because we have to close on time. Thanks.
Good morning, Pietro Guastamacchio from ANSA. A question, like last week, some groups refused to sign a statement on Greenland because they say it was too harsh towards Donald Trump and the United States. Today here you ask Callas and von der Leyen to use harsher, or to use the strength of Europe. Like these two differences are not marginal. Like we are looking at two completely different positions in the European Parliament towards the United States. What would be your message to those groups that refuse to sign? Like how could we bridge this position back together?
Well, obviously, the far right has put forward, what they've said. They've said what they've said on America and Trump. Everything they use to attack the European project is inversely proportional to the possibility of responding to Trump. All of the attacks he's put on us. They've just said nothing, the far right, when it comes to his attacks on Europe. And therefore, it just shows how little they are they're ready to defend the European project. So these different models are very clear. What we need to do now, what the EPP needs to do now, is say very clearly what it wants, i.e., are we defending a strong, strategically autonomous Europe that defends freedom to be able to legislate and to have its own agenda, defending international multilateralism? That's the Europe we are in favour of. The EPP, what it should do is stop negotiating the omnibuses with the far right, which is obviously incapable of saying anything about the people who are trying to destroy Europe.
S&D alone can freeze this deal, right? I mean, it's true that with the support of EPP, it's more tight, but if EPP suddenly was like, okay, let's go ahead with the deal, S&D could still block it. So under which circumstances will S&D want to pass this deal again? What needs to happen so that you stop freezing this deal?
There is an agreement at this point in time between the majority groups to stop. So at this point in time, there's no alternative to work on it. We'll see what happens, how things pan out. We'll see how the Trump administration moves forward. We are wanting more instruments, the anti-coercion instruments. That would be a very clear tool. We adopted it here in the EU to be able to defend ourselves vis-à-vis these sorts of attacks in trade issues. And that's what's happening now from the Trump administration. So we think that these are tools that should be activated. The EPP hasn't yet got to that point. I think we should be doing this already. We should be asking the European Commission to activate the anti-coercion instrument to move forward here. But let me just say, the focus at the moment has to be on defending Europe, our sovereignty, vis-à-vis the threats from this imperialist, Mr. Trump. His objective is very clear. So, destroying the EU project, that's what he said in the MAGA document. He said it very clearly there. They were going to be supporting forces here in Europe that defended patriotism, the far right, and he's doing exactly that. He's fulfilling the agenda. So we need to show what we want to do, defend what we want as Europe.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, everybody. And in case of questions, please come back to us. Merci.
Channel 2 English